A weak economy, a massive deficit, the Mississauga gas plant fiasco, the need to find new revenue for transit and infrastructure, and a lot of rookies in the new cabinet. All grist for our mill here on the agenda. Joining us tonight to discuss day one of Kathleen Wynne as Premier and ponder how many more days there are ahead for this nascent government. Here's Deepika Damarla, Liberal MPP for Mississauga East Cooksville. Jane McKenna, Progressive Conservative MPP for Burlington. Catherine Fife, NDP member for the riding of Kitchener-Waterloo. And Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. And we're happy to have all of you here. I think, not you, Mike, but the three of you for the first time ever. So it's good to have you in this studio. And we want to remind our viewers you can be part of this conversation. Online producer Naveen Vaswani is hosting a Twitter chat right now, so chime in using the hashtag AgendaTVO and let us know what you think that the government's first priority ought to be, and that's where I want to start with all of you. New cabinet today, new throne speech next week, new budget pretty shortly thereafter. Charles Sousa budget, first one for him. What is the one thing that you are looking for this government to do as it rolls out its new agenda? Official opposition first, please.
Well, we've got 600,000 people unemployed, 400,000 people on welfare, and 200,000 people that have just given up. So hoping for the best, that out of the gate, which we saw today, she increased 23% of the cabinet, which was a bit disheartening for myself because we're trying to rein that in. So that was disheartening for me today.
You didn't like the fact that cabinet's bigger.
Right.
It's not all-time biggest, but it's larger than before.
Right.
Bad signal?
Yeah, clearly, right out of the gate.
What's the bad signal it sends? She said we got a lot of work to do, so I need more people.
But you know what? It doesn't, just because you have more people doesn't mean that that's better. And you want to make sure that, you know, we spend $1.8 million more an hour than we take in. 20% of what we spend is borrowed money. It's our third largest expenditure. We're not in a position to, you know, if anything, I was hoping she'd come out with a smaller cabinet. Very disappointed.
Catherine Fife.
You know, we're looking for a change in the tone. Prior to the prorogation, there certainly was a sense that this minority government was still acting like a majority government. And that's why we've put out some ideas to stay focused on the priorities of people in the province. Jobs, the economy, healthcare. And we put those ideas out in front of any budget conversation, in front of any throne speech, to signal that, you know, we need to put the priorities of people first in the province. And the Liberals have to come to us to work with us in that endeavor. Any
uptake on that you know of?
I think that the youth employment, you know, there's a growing and emerging crisis in the province of Ontario. 25% of university graduates don't find work in their chosen area of education. A huge skills gap and disconnect from jobs and education. And, you know, I think that there's room for us to work on that portfolio. And I think actually people expect us to work on issues like that. So we're watching very carefully, and, you know, we've been open and transparent and frank in that conversation.
Mike Schreiner, day one of the new Wynne government. What are you looking for?
I think we have to change the poisonous political environment at Queen's Park. I think the pre-prorogation situation highlighted that. I think the prorogation by the McGuinty Liberals was a slap in the face of democracy, and I think we have to close the loopholes that allows prorogation for politically partisan purposes. Fortunately, we've got off to a bit of a rocky start. Attack ads by the Conservatives the day after Miss Wynne was elected. The NDP, the first thing they said was a public inquiry in the gas plant fiasco. I think the people of Ontario want us to focus in on creating jobs, making Ontario, I would say, the global leader in the emerging clean tech economy. We need to focus in on cleaning up the mess in education and getting our classrooms working again. And we need to focus in on making sure that Ontario gets its deficit under control in a balanced way that doesn't put all the back of balancing it on the most vulnerable citizens.
Okay, lots of advice for you there. What are you picking up on?
Well, Steve, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm a big fan of the show, so I'm very excited to be here. I think what all the Liberals and Premier Wynne is looking for is real cooperation from the two opposition parties. And there's been some conversations, phone calls, letters, some suggestions that the opposition does want to work with us, but you've got to walk the talk. And I guess Michael referred to the idea that the Conservatives came up with the attack ad, and for Andrea Horwath to ask for a public inquiry when the Auditor General is already looking at the gas plants suggests that perhaps there's some politics at play, and we really need to get past the politics and look Ontarians in the eye and say, yes, you sent us a minority government. We've got to make this work, and the way to make this work is for us to all work together sincerely, put the politics on ice.
You chuckled there for a second. How come?
I do. I mean, that the Liberals are accusing other parties of playing political games when prorogation was a major play in the province. And, the Liberal Party has moved gas plants around like chess pieces. So if we're going to be honest about games, and if we're going to be honest about starting fresh, then we have to be honest and we have to be transparent. Now, the gas plant inquiry, this is the fundamental difference between a select committee, is that it would have looked at the process. How did those decisions get made? Who made those decisions? We know the timing is suspect. We know that the taxpayers are going to be on the line for a long time. So a public inquiry actually would have removed that from the very political environment of the legislature. Let me do a little quick follow-up here. In essence,
let me do a little quick follow-up. The NDP did want a public inquiry into the gas plant thing, with the theory being that takes it out of the realm of politics. But you wanted it to report back in August or September, which potentially would have been thick in the beginning of a fall election campaign, which doesn't really take it out of politics.
Well, the parameters and the timelines for an inquiry can be set. I mean, there was some concern about cost, but, if you set the framework for a public inquiry, you set the framework, and that could be done in cooperation. If Ms. Wynne is serious about getting answers on the Mississauga and the Oakville gas plants, it would have been a solution.
This raises questions about whether a new premier can, in fact, put a new coat of paint or change the channel, use whatever metaphor you like, to show that it's a new day. Can she?
Absolutely, but I just want to say something. We can keep pointing fingers because I could say the same thing. That it's really rich for the NDP and the Conservatives to talk about the gas plant cancellation, because my question to you is, if you had won the election, you had made the same promises. What would you have done? Would you have either not kept your promise and kept the gas plant going, or would you have canceled it and faced the cost? So, it's a little rich coming, given that, both parties were actually competing with each other to say who's going to cancel it faster. So the point is, Premier Wynne has clearly signaled that we weren't perfect, mistakes have been made. How can we move this forward? Let's look at what can we do next that's in the interests of Ontarians, rather than saying, well, what went wrong. I mean, we do need to know what went wrong. I don't disagree with that. But my point is, you guys would have done the same thing that we did, which was cancel the gas plant. So let's move forward.
Can I find out from the official opposition whether they intend to continue the contempt proceedings against the new Minister of Energy that were going on against the old Minister of Energy?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Does that move things along?
Well, I think, it saddens me when we talk about that it's a poisonous environment. I'll tell you the biggest shocker to me when I became a new MPP was that questions and answer period, no one answers anything. So
it's not called question and answer period. It's called question period.
But you know what? When you're asking a question, you're looking for an answer. That's our job as opposition for the Ontario people, to give them the information so they can educate themselves and have the tools to move forward with that. It's Tom Adams from the National Post has said it's up to $1.3 billion. We have a responsibility for the Ontario taxpayers to find out where that money went. I've got people yesterday in my constit saying to me, Jane, why are we closing parks? Well, we're closing parks because of the mismanagement of all the money that we spent.
Okay, let's talk some transit. It seems clear now that the new Premier has said it's not a question of whether we raise new revenue in order to pay for all the infrastructure and transit improvements we need. It's, we're going to do it. We can debate how or which ones, but we're going to do it. You okay with that, Mike Schreiner?
We have to raise revenue to pay for public transit.
How do you want to do it?
My preference would be congestion charges, essentially pay the cost of what it takes to use our roads. I also think we have to look at the priorities. Instead of continuing to build more highways, which just lead to more congestion, we have to really focus in on prioritizing that money into public transit. And by the way, let's take 1% of our transportation budget and dedicate it to safe streets for cycling and walking. In the US, they spend 1.5% on cycling and walking. In Ontario, we spend 0. So let's make our streets safe. Let's raise the revenue and dedicate it to public transit, clear up congestion, improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods.
How about that, Catherine Fife?
Well, you know, transit is a big equation when you look at the economy as well. So we have to get transit straight, and we have to actually invest some targeted funding to green options as well. You know, when you're looking at the overall province, and my critic portfolio is also infrastructure, we have an infrastructure deficit and a pure lack of leadership on that.
So yes to raising new revenue.
Well, we're going to have to raise new revenue through creating more jobs, and that's what our focus is. It's a balanced approach.
Okay, but that's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is we have to raise new revenue by congestion charges or surtaxes or fees.
We haven't weighed in on the congestion charges yet, so we're out in the public consulting right now.
What does the official opposition have to say about this?
Well, you know, we lose $6 billion in the GTHA alone from productivity. That's you getting back and forth to work. That's, you know, creating this, you know, having the environment we have that people want to be here. So it's very, very important that we do that. I mean, Tim has spoken many times about Metrolinx having it all under one umbrella. So we've got, you know, we haven't got all different pockets. The biggest issue that we see constantly is we have too many people doing too many things and nobody knows what the other person's doing. And we can't keep throwing things out as a Band-Aid. We have to look at the big picture of things so we can move forward and have a plan moving forward with that.
Okay, but the big picture seems to indicate right now that more revenues are going to have to be raised if you want to pay for subways that go through Toronto and, you know, light rail that goes through other big cities in the province. Are you up for that?
Well, you know, Tim's come out numerous times on the infrastructure and spoken about having it under one umbrella, and he's contemplated
I'm not talking about
back
governance
and forth.
models here. I'm talking about fees or congestion charges or, you know, some kind of user charge to use the highways. I haven't heard him talk about that.
Well, we're going to have to do something to create that. So, you know, he's had that on the table. So
some new revenue stream
we have to
will
do something. We have to do something.
That's a yes.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Well, you know, I was just reading a report by the Center for Policy Alternatives that said that Canada has to spend about $20 to $30 billion a year on top of what we're already spending. And, you know, you do the math. Clearly, you know, there's got to be a way to raise revenues. But I think what the public is looking for is some transparency, and they want to know, if I'm paying $5 more, is it really going to build that subway line? So the whole idea of, you know, a direct link between raising the money and spending it, I like that idea. You know, if you're going to raise money to spend it on transit, let's make it really transparent so people can see that if they're paying a little bit more, it's actually going directly and not to a general revenue. So I quite like that idea.
Let me follow up. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I think the people of Ontario deserve an honest conversation here and a frank conversation. And I hear a lot of skirting around the issue of will we raise revenue or will we not? We have to do something about it. And the bottom line is the Toronto Board of Trade has come out and said we have to do this. It's costing our economy in the Greater Golden Horseshoe $6 billion a year. I'm sorry, money doesn't grow on trees. It isn't fairy dust that's going to solve this. We have to have political leadership in this province that says we need to raise the revenue that's going to be dedicated to funding a world-class transit system. It's critical to our economy and our quality of life.
Who's saying that?
It's about priorities, right? Then it comes to priorities. So you're building roads or you're building transit. Kitchener-Waterloo has been waiting for a GO system that actually works for the people. Public transit will not work if it doesn't work for the people. And so we have to address cost in that equation, and we have to prioritize. I mean, so you and I agree on that. It will come down to roads or
I don't know if you agree, because he's saying you got to fish or cut bait on the issue of how you're going to pay for this, and you guys say you're still consulting.
Well, I mean, we acknowledge that it is a major driver of the economy, and so therefore you actually have to be strategic about where you're investing those dollars. And it's not just about Toronto.
Who's being honest on this, and who is fudging, in your view?
I agree. We need a world-class transit system. I want to see all-day GO service between Toronto, Guelph, and KW throughout the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It's going to cost money to do it, and we're going to have to raise it. And it's going to have to come from something like a gas tax, road tolls, congestion charges. It's going to have to come from somewhere. And I just think we need the political leadership and the courage to talk about it.
Who's saying it? Who isn't?
Well,
You're saying it?
I'm saying it. I think
Premier Wynne
seems to be starting to move in that direction. I know when the Environment Commissioners reported in the past, the three parties at Queen's Park have said, no way, that is not on the table. I'm saying let's put that conversation on the table, and I'm willing to work with the new Premier to have that conversation.
I think the Premier Wynne has clearly indicated that she wants that conversation to start. You know, we need an honest conversation with Ontarians, that if we want the gold-plated services, how do we pay for it? Because borrowing is not an option. And I think Premier Wynne has very, very clearly signaled that we need the transportation we deserve because it's an economic imperative, and how are we going to pay for it?
Okay. The NDP came out with some new ideas over the last couple of weeks that I'd like to have some discussion about right now and see whether there's any uptake in the new government to do so. Make the case, if you would, for the closing of tax loopholes that you would like to see taken away from business and have that money redirected towards youth unemployment and so on.
Fundamentally, you know, we think that if you're going to create a youth employment strategy that actually works, that you have to incentivize the hiring of youth. And we'd rather reward businesses who create those jobs than companies who go out a night on the town and get the tax credit for that. So, I mean, that fundamentally does come down to a priority conversation about where you're giving tax breaks and where you're not. And so on that issue, and I think that Premier Wynne has signaled that she's receptive to the idea of a youth employment strategy which actually gets youth educated, skilled trades back into the workforce so that they have the experience, so that they can build a resume. And you know, there are models where this has been successful.
Paid for by the closing of corporate tax loopholes.
Yeah, that's a priority for us.
Can you live with that?
Well, I need to, you know what? I feel that the best way forward is not to get too prescriptive. So, you know, the NDP has said that among the priority areas is youth, addressing youth unemployment, as well as the whole issue of social fairness and the implementation of the Francis Lankin report, for instance, the reform of social assistance. And I know that Tim Hudak has also agreed on some parts of the Francis Lankin report, in particular removing the perverse barriers that...
We shouldn't forget Munir Sheikh. He's the co-chair with
Sheikh
Francis Lankin.
Well.
He was in there too.
Thank you very much, Munir Sheikh. You know, especially with respect to removing the perverse disincentive there is now to actually finding work if you're on Ontario Works. My point being is that, you know, it's more important that we agree on common goals. But if you get too prescriptive on how we're going to solve this, it may not be the best way to go forward when all three of us are trying to work together. Let's go with evidence-based solutions, so that an evidence-based solution isn't about ideology, or it's not an NDP idea or a Liberal idea. Here are the priorities we can agree on. For instance, the NDP and the Liberals can agree on addressing youth unemployment and you know, more fairness in how we, I guess, address social assistance. With the Conservatives, we can find some common ground on balancing the books.
I want to see if that's true. Do you have any common ground with the new Liberal government on this?
Like, we have a responsibility as MPPs to give the information that we need out there. When you look right now in Greece, they're rioting about their programs because their debt and deficit is an issue and they're bankrupt. You know, we've got to be realistic, and I respect the fact that we're all talking about all things that we'd like to do, but if you don't look at the bigger picture of things, which is our debt and deficit, and get that under control and figure out how we're going to, you know, create an environment for jobs. Because Bay Street, you know, capital's mobile. Bay Street knows it, right? People aren't going to come to high taxes, high debt, and high hydro, and they sure as heck aren't going to stay here either. We have to create the environment for that to happen. And talking about the 600,000 people that have woken up with, you know, that don't have a job, we need to create that environment for them. And we won't be able to do the social services if we don't fix the debt and deficit.
So can I get you on record? You are against continuing full-day kindergarten, right? Leave it where it is.
Temporarily.
Temporarily. Leave it where it is.
Yeah.
And the $1 billion that we now borrow in order to help subsidize power rates, you're against that as well. Well, right? First
of all, with the all-day kindergarten, you know, that's temporary. And the reason we're saying that is because when you looked at Don Drummond, he gave 362 recommendations, said follow them all or put something into it. There isn't any money. I don't know what part of people don't understand. 0-0. So as much as we would like to have all those things, it's physically, like, it's impossible to do it when we have a debt and deficit the way we have it. So it's reckless and irresponsible to continue a government with all these hopes and dreams for people when the reality is that we don't have the money to do it. Like, just right now with PROD, 127 days we've been off and we've spent $3.5 billion, then 127 days has been added to our debt. You know, we can't afford to continue on the path we're on.
So I'm just going to start with, you know, governments are, I mean, I sort of intrigued by the idea that governments, it's reckless for a government to have hopes and dreams for Ontarians, because I think that is the biggest part of leadership, is of course we must always continue to have hopes and dreams for Ontarians, a better Ontario, you know.
As long as you can pay for them.
Yeah, right. And absolutely, but nobody's saying that they're mutually exclusive. they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think Premier Wynne has made it very, very clear that her priority is a fair Ontario, but not without fiscal, I guess, what's the word, being fiscally conservative. Or she's made it very, very clear that balancing the books by 2017 is a priority. The only difference is what we've said is, well, take full-day kindergarten, for example. You don't want to roll it out? Well, we're going to have to fire teachers then. Do we really want to do that? We said instead, let's go with
they say yes.
Well, that's where the Liberals and the conservatives.
You've said you got to lay off 10,000 education workers.
No, but you know what? We don't say that. What we say is that we need to get the money back on the front line, which is the education and the health care. So in saying that, what I struggle with is everything is a Band-Aid, right? Everything is throwing 1% and 2% where there's no measured outcomes to know what's the best thing we can possibly do. I have a household, we all have family, we all have kids, we all run a budget, and we all, live within those means. You can't constantly continue to be the good guy and throw money out to things when there's no money to pay for it. It's reckless, it's irresponsible, and, as much as you want to be fiscally responsible, we owe it to the taxpayers to give them the information that they need so they can make an educated decision.
Haven't heard from Mike in a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my PC colleague here just dodged your billion-dollar question. It was one of the biggest ticket items in the Drummond report.
The energy subsidy.
The energy subsidy. None of the parties want to talk about it. And the bottom line is, this again is where we need courageous leadership at Queen's Park to look at people and say, you know what, we can no longer afford to borrow over $1 billion to give you a little discount off your electricity bill every month that primarily, frankly, benefits the wealthy because they're the biggest users of electricity. We have a plan, the Green Party has a plan that says we can reduce poverty and pollution and balance the budget at the same time. Let's take that $1 billion. Let's fund the social assistance review, which is $345 million. I'm sorry the Liberals said there's no money for it. Well, I just found you $1 billion.
That's not true. That's not true at all. Premier Wynne's made it very clear.
John Malloy, the day that came out, said there is no money for that. I've just found you $1 billion for it, which still leaves you some extra money, about $650 million, to provide a little help to our most vulnerable citizens around rising energy prices. And then we still have money left to put at deficit reduction. But it requires an honest conversation with Ontarians about this, not skirting around the issues.
Let me ask the NDP about this. The $1 billion subsidy that Don Drummond says we don't need anymore because it just inflates power bills and its money, as Mike would suggest, that is better spent elsewhere. Would the NDP be prepared to get rid of that?
The entire energy file needs a progressive rethink. We have wind farmers who are creating energy that we can't actually access. We're overpaying for that wind energy. The entire energy file needs to be have a progressive look at it.
Including the $1 billion subsidy?
We're going to have to look at the $1 billion subsidy. There's no doubt about it. I mean, but we have to reinvest also in green renewables as well. And moving gas plants around at a cost of $1 billion isn't a good way to spend money. And on the full-day kindergarten,
we don't know it's $1 billion yet. Everybody keeps saying that, but we don't know that yet.
We know it's not $230 million.
So I do want to get in here because this moving of the gas plant was also something your party wanted to do. So I just don't understand why you keep saying. Well, actually, you were campaigning on it. You were campaigning on it.
We wouldn't have cited it there, and we wouldn't put it there in the first place.
That's not the point.
But this is the revisionism that we're going to be probably seeing, and that's why an inquiry would have been helpful. But on the full-day kindergarten, I just wanted to touch on that. I mean, full-day kindergarten isn't a Band-Aid, first of all. I mean, and you can't stop delivering full-day kindergarten to half the children in the province of Ontario. It's irresponsible. And if you were to stop it right now, you would be cutting jobs. And I think that there's enough crisis and turmoil in the education sector by the Liberals and the Conservatives supporting Bill 115. We have to rebuild trust back into the system. Threatening to end a program, which actually is a progressive program recognized around the world, is not a good way to reinstate that trust and rebuild that trust in the education sector.
Do you think I should ask you about that? Do you think Premier Wynne's first moves to, in her view, reestablish trust with the teachers has been going well?
It's hard to know. Those talks are happening behind closed doors. And I've said already publicly that I'm not quite sure what she can negotiate with. And also she's negotiating from a really difficult position, Steve. I mean, she stood up and she voted for Bill 115, as did the Conservatives. And that's a hard place to reach across the floor up from.
So if I can just jump in here. I just want to address a couple of issues. One is the whole idea of full-day kindergarten. And I agree with Catherine that it's not a Band-Aid because, the research does show that it's one of the best things we can do for our children. And I think there's a difference between spending and investing. And really, to me, full-day kindergarten is about investing in our children. The second is that, every time we have to choose between layoffs or freezing wages, we chose to freeze wages. And that's what really Bill 115 came down to. Not ideal. Let me finish. Would have preferred a negotiated settlement. But the whole point was we drew a, line in the sand and said we will not fire anybody. But we do know that we need to balance the books, so we will go for a wage freeze because the government's biggest expenditure line is wages. And you said you run a budget, I run a budget. If I need to cut somewhere, I've got to cut in the big spot. I've got to either get rid of a car lease or move to a smaller house. You got to tackle the big expenses, not the little ones. And so that's what we did. It was a stand that I think most fair-minded Ontarians would agree that you save jobs, and everybody takes a bit of a wage freeze.
Well, I need to challenge you on that.
You challenge, then you challenge, then you challenge.
Okay, so I mean, it's interesting to hear that a wage freeze was what you were going for, because a wage freeze was actually on the table, and Premier Wynne has actually recently announced, and to the Toronto Star editorial board, that Bill 115 and recalling the legislature 2 weeks early was about winning the by-election in Kitchener-Waterloo.
So what are you complaining about?
She's on the record as saying, I'm complaining because I'm complaining.
You won because of that. It backfired in their face, and you won.
I'm complaining because they created chaos in an education system unnecessarily. If they had truly allowed the negotiations process to play itself out, we would not be here right now. And you don't mess with education.
Mike Schreiner.
I'm a small business owner, and the best way you negotiate with your employees is to actually work with them, have them help you find savings. Taking away their democratic bargaining rights is not the way to go about it. The teachers came to the table. That's what we need to be clear about. The teachers' unions came to the table with a wage freeze proposal. They were ready to identify the savings we needed to balance our budget, and the door was slammed in their face. And that is not the way you deal with your employees.
So let's be realistic. I mean, first of all, we got called back into the House 2 weeks early. We were told that it would stop the strike, the kids were going to be in school. But there was one line in the Student First Act that said that the cabinet could go back and repeal Bill 115. So I sit here and I think, you know what, you wonder why people don't like politicians, because that's not something that was reactive, that was an agenda that they set themselves. So here's the bottom line. We owe it to our kids to go to school and to have a life and to go and have extracurricular activities. As much as the teachers don't need to be held hostage to do extracurricular activities, pardon me, neither does that. Those kids have a right to go and have that. School doesn't stop at 3 o'clock. And it's all a game. And the fact is that we as politicians need to straighten it out. The teachers, this isn't about the teachers. This is about the teachers' unions that are looking out for the best interests of the teachers to make sure they get what they want. And the only people that is impacted is the parents and the kids. And nobody deserves to treat anybody like that. I mean, it's put it in constant turmoil. I mean, we all have kids in school, and the extracurricular activities, my office is inundated with calls from it, and people are frustrated because they don't know what the actual facts are and what's going on.
With a little more than 10 minutes to go here, let's go into the home stretch here and ask the following question: can they all just get along? Kathleen Wynne says, Deepika, that she wants a more collegial government. In her speech today, as she was sworn in as premier, she mentioned the leaders of the opposition, which is an unusual thing for a new premier to do. Do you really think it's possible in this minority parliament to lower the temperature and find common ground with the opposition?
If there's one person who can do it, it's Premier Wynne. I mean, she's staked her ground. She's clearly said that, I was watching her, and there was an interesting choice of words that, Steve, you may have noticed as well, where she said she wants to co-create the plan going forward. I mean, those are powerful words. I mean, she's actually said she wants to co-create, along with the two opposition parties, our way forward. So that, to me, shows tremendous commitment to the idea of making a minority government work. And we've all seen her open style. We've seen that she's a very open person, a very engaging person, and I really think she's got what it takes to do. And if people can't get along with Premier Wynne, then one really has to wonder.
If they really want to co-create and are genuine about that, do they have a partner in the NDP?
Yeah, I mean, we have, our leader, Andrea Horwath, has been very clear. I mean, we're ready to work for the people. And as long as those priorities that we've put on the table are part of the conversation, they certainly aren't ultimatums, because we understand that, you know what the people of the province want? They want us to try to work. And I think, though, actually that, and I just want to mention, today was a powerful day in the legislature for the first female premier to be elected and to take her seat and to, you know, represent. I thought that was a very powerful moment. But we have to also remember that Premier Wynne is inheriting quite a mess, and it was the making of the government that she was part of which led us to this point in time. And so if there was ever a time to actually reach out and truly listen and truly, you know, because language is powerful, co-create, those are powerful words. It's going to take the action to demonstrate that those words are honest and that there's a true intention to work in a collaborative way.
Mike, I actually found it unusual. 20 feet away from her was Dalton McGuinty, sitting in the audience. And when she said, we've made mistakes, we've got to fix those mistakes, we've got to find out why we made those mistakes and correct them going forward and be responsible for them, own up to it. That's an unusual thing for somebody who's taking over to say. Do you believe it?
Well, let's hope that our new premier will be accountable for the mistakes that the government has made and take action on fixing those. And I do think it is important. This is a historic day. I mean, our first woman premier in Ontario, the fact that actually Canadian politics is changing. We have our 4 largest provinces now are led by women premiers. I do want to do a shout out for Elizabeth May, Green Party leader, Parliamentarian of the Year last year. I think, and I think part of the reason she was Parliamentarian of the Year was her willingness to cooperate and work out and reach out and work with other parties. And I think the Green Party of Ontario can play a role. I can find things in all 3 of your platforms that we can agree with bits and pieces of it. I think each of you might be able to agree with bits and pieces of it. And I'm happy to put that forward and work with the new premier and moving this province forward and putting the public interest first.
Am I hearing you say we needed a female Green Party of Ontario leader as well?
Well, we have a great deputy leader in Judith, who was on just a few weeks ago.
Yes, she was.
But I think for right now, I'm happy to shoulder the burden for now and work with the other opposition leaders and the premier.
Jane McKenna, where are the areas where you think your party can? I keep thinking of that Venn diagram, you know, where those circles intersect, and I'm wondering where the areas are of intersection between you and this new Liberal government, where you think you can make something happen.
Well, you know, I'm going to say this again. You know, we're always hopeful, right? But we need to hear a plan. That's first and foremost. But, you know, I struggle with the fact that we keep talking about the environment as poison. We owe it to the people of Ontario to get the questions answered that they're asking to be answered. You know, we sit here and we talk about all the things that are going on. You know, we've got Orange, you know, the OPP is coming back with that investigation. We've got 2 power plants that Tom Adams has come up to say there's $1.3 billion. I mean, we've got parks that are closing because of the mismanagement of the money that we've spent. This is about Ontario people, all of us sitting here that pay taxes, that deserve the truth of what we're going to do to move forward. There's 600,000 people out of a job right now.
Okay, but that's what you've referred to is your job as the official opposition.
Tim said it over and over and over again.
But I'm trying to find out where are the common areas where you can work with the government to vote with them to keep this parliament alive so that people aren't going back to the polls a year and a half after the last election.
Well, you want to make 100%, it's jobs in the economy. It's creating that environment, and you're looking at the jobs in the economy. Like I said, you're not going to be able to look at social service programs if you can't get the debt and deficit in order. So we're very hopeful. Tim has spoken to her, and you know, we're hopeful moving forward to see what's going to happen. We've got to wait to see a plan.
This is going to be a weird question, but let's try this anyway. Did prorogation, in fact, as much as everybody says they didn't like it, did it work? Because it lowered the temperature. McGuinty is gone. Laurel Broughton is out of education. You've got a new education minister. You've got a new premier with a new way of, she says, doing business. Could you argue that prorogation actually was a good thing because it lowered the temperature and it seems to have created a new opening? What do you say?
Well, you know, Premier Dalton McGuinty said one of the prime reasons for prorogation was that Parliament had become dysfunctional. And so, I can only hope that going forward, there's a new cabinet, new premier, new ministers and key portfolios. Let's give them a chance. Let's all work together and see if we can't make this legislature work, because clearly it wasn't working 3-4 months ago.
How much of a honeymoon are these guys entitled to?
I wanted to answer the prorogation question.
Okay, go ahead.
Because, I only got 11 days in, and, it's true. I mean, the temperatures were high, but there was a good reason for people to be angry, because we weren't getting answers. And I think personally that dragged on a little bit too long. I think, the Conservatives calling the Liberals, incompetent, the Liberals calling the Conservatives mean is not a productive use of time. That said, we still need to get some answers on that. Prorogation was an evasive tool, and everyone in the province knows it, except for the Liberal Party. I hope that we never have to use prorogation again, because it doesn't instill confidence in the government. It doesn't instill confidence for the economy. People want to see politicians working at Queen's Park, creating legislation, working together, moving the economy and the environment forward.
Let me do a quick follow-up with Deepak on that. Martin Redcon in the Toronto Star has written quite a bit about this, actually. Including a column just a couple of weeks ago where he said the new premier, if she really wanted to reach out to the opposition, would pass some hard and fast rules which say prorogation is allowed under these circumstances, but not under these circumstances. Not if you're trying to avoid the hangman's noose, or not if you're trying to avoid a contempt hearing, but if you want to sort of reboot the government, okay. Do you think your government would be open to making some hard, fast rules that everybody could agree on in this?
I think for us to do something like that, all three parties would have to be on side, and if we can all work together and figure out a way that's in the interest of Ontarians, why not?
In fact, Andrea has put forward that idea, so and it's copied under what Jack Layton brought forward.
Redcon's article goes on to say that both leaders of the opposition sort of backed away from it. I mean, I've only read it. I don't know beyond what I read in that article that you're referring to, but the sense I got was that both Tim Hudak and Andrea sort of talked about it at one time, but they're not really talking about it now.
Mike.
Steve, I was actually going to say that I've actually identified this as one of the first areas that all the parties should agree on. I mean, we're all here because we believe in democracy. I mean, we wouldn't be running for office if we didn't believe in democracy. And I think prorogation for partisan political purposes is a slap in the face of democracy. It undermines the basic responsibility of responsible government, which is to have the legislature sitting, holding the government accountable, passing legislation, doing the people's business. So could we all agree that never allowing prorogation for partisan political purposes to happen again, we should not allow that to happen, and let's work together to figure out a way to fix it.
You okay with that?
Here's the thing. This isn't our voice. We're the facilitator for the people of Ontario. And the bottom line is that you had a responsibility as a premier to answer the questions, get to the bottom of the issues, and to stand up and own what you did. And walking away and taking your candy and going home, it's not what we think. It's what the Ontario people think of what happened there. They felt totally let down by what he did, and 4 months of going off and then running a Liberal campaign with taxpayers' money was not the thing to be doing. It was, it was very reckless and irresponsible.
So I was just going to say, I mean, it wasn't 4 months. We lost 18 sitting days to prorogation. The rest of it would have been part of your normal Christmas break. I think full marks to Premier Wynne that despite such a short runway, she's bringing back the House right after Family Day. Hopefully we'll make up those 18 lost days by sitting a little bit longer in the summer and make sure that any legislative agenda that was lost in those 18 days is made up. But let me finish.
It's not just the 18 days. It's the committees that were not set. Yeah. I mean, you interrupted. The Liberals prevented the work of government from happening. Ms. Wynne, I hope, has signaled that those committees will be set so that we can actually get to work on justice, on the finance, on the economy.
And here's the thing. We've spent $3.8 billion in the 127 days we've been off, no matter how you cut the pie. I mean, all of a sudden now we're prorogued. Things are still spending, life's still going on, but yet no one's overseeing it. I mean, that's totally reckless if you ask me.
Let me ask, we got a minute left here.
Yeah.
Do you think the people of Ontario are desperate for an election to get rid of these guys?
I never speculate. I know that the people of Ontario are engaged in talking about right now what's been going on for the first time since I've been in here for 17, 16 months. People are angry. People feel that they were let down terribly. They feel that they have to take accountability and ownership for it. And don't use those words cheaply by saying accountability and transparent. They want to know, at the end of the day, as people that are sitting, and we humbly sit here to facilitate for the people of Ontario, we owe it to them to get the answers that they deserve with their money that they've spent on money that was...
But it's a three-way tie right now. As you look at the polls, it's essentially a three-way tie. Do you feel as if the public is champing at the bit to have another election?
Absolutely not. And you know what, Steve, I knock on doors 5 days a week. I love to do that. And I can't say that the public is angry, but what the public is, it's worried. And they want to make sure that we have a strong economy. They want to make sure that the kids can go back to, have their extracurriculars. They're worried about bread and butter issues, and they want government to work, and that's what Premier Wynne has promised.
I know you just got elected, but go ahead.
And they want us to try. That's what I'm hearing at the door.
For how long?
They want to see an honest attempt on trying to move their priorities forward and put those priorities at the front. And I think that there is a credibility issue here with the government. We have to demonstrate that we are there to work for the people, and
so does that mean you can't defeat the throne speech? You can't defeat the budget?
We've said very openly that we're listening, and we'll be listening closely to the throne speech.
Okay. I've enjoyed listening to all of you, and thank you for coming here today. Deepika Damerla, the Liberal MPP for Mississauga East Cooksville, Jane McKenna, the PC member for Burlington, Catherine Fife, the NDP member for Kitchener-Waterloo, and Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. Thanks so much for this conversation, everybody.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.